Looking for evidence, the FBI receives orders to raid an election office. We'll tell you what they're looking for. And a South Florida councilman is under fire today after using the N word twice during a public meeting. And later, a popular social media star is creating a family event that everyone can take part in. More of that to come. Well, good afternoon. It's Thursday, January 29th. Thank you for joining us for the breakdown with Brittany Noble. Here are your news headlines. The FBI raided an election office in Georgia's Fulton County outside Atlanta on Wednesday. This comes as President Trump claims that his 2020 election defeat was the result of widespread voting fraud. The warrant sought a number of records related to the 2020 elections. Agencies, computers, and ballots that they believe were held at the Fulton County Election Hub and Operations Center in Union City as part of an investigation into possible election interference. This is the latest string of actions by Trump's administration to use the DOJ against his perceived enemies and to intervene in cases where he believes he was treated unfairly. Democrat Joe Biden won Georgia and defeated Trump, who was seeking re-election back in 2020. In Oregon, a judge has dismissed a DOJ lawsuit seeking to seize private voters' information. The ACLU argues that the DOJ actions undermine the freedom to vote and voter privacy. The ruling is a clear victory for Oregon voters. Mark Kindle, the president of the League of Women Voters of Oregon, says the court's decision affirms the state's strong privacy protections and sends an important message safeguarding voters' private data, and it's essential to maintaining trust in our democratic system. The league is proud to stand with Oregons in defending these rights. In Florida, a Miami area councilman apologizes after using the N word twice during a meeting. Councilman Anders Urban says that he was quoting someone to describe where he thinks the country is heading. At the end of last week's planning and zoning meeting, he wanted to bring up an issue of Border Patrol agents stopping people in the community. In his statement, he used the N word 2 times after receiving backlash. He apologized despite acknowledging his mistake. His expression of regret has come with mixed reviews.
All slurs should be globally buried. I acknowledge and understand that the word I use, no matter the context, is beyond offensive and even traumatizing. None of this excuses my choice to use the word. I am sorry.
Thank you for your apology. I just wanted to go on record that I found your words to be incredibly offensive and vile.
But I am very appreciative to find that this is your tone tonight and that you are taking responsibility.
Well, a new study published by JAMA Network Open shows that discrimination shortens lives in Black communities. Nearly half of the mortality gap between Black and white adults can be traced to a cumulative toll of a lifetime of stress and heightened inflammation. In the study, it shows chronic stress takes a biological toll that shortens lives. Well, rapper Nicki Minaj has made her stance clear about where she stands politically. She revealed that she is Trump's #1 fan at an event touting President Trump's government-supported investment accounts for babies.
I am probably the president's #1 fan. And that's not going to change. Hate or what people have to say, it does not affect me at all. It actually motivates me to support him more. We're not going to let them get away with bullying him and, the smear campaigns. It's not going to work.
Movement as her rap career has faltered. Minaj first started turning heads when she spoke with Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica, at Turning Point USA's America Fest last month. And happening today, civil rights attorney Ben Crump says the family of Sonia Massey will speak to the media after former Sangamon County Deputy Sean Grayson is sentenced. Massey, a 36-year-old Black woman, was shot and killed inside her Springfield, Illinois home on July 6, 2024. That's after she called in 911 to report a possible prowler. Body camera footage showed the encounter escalated quickly inside her home before Grayson fired the fatal shot. Now we want to take you to an interview with our legal analyst, Candace Kelly. Well, I want to welcome legal analyst Candace Kelly onto the breakdown today. She is a Roland Martin Unfiltered commentator, and she's an educator, and she can walk us through some of the big court cases that we should keep our eyes on. Candace, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Good to see you and be here.
So let's start off in Minnesota in this battle for evidence. What's going on with Border Patrol and this recent shooting that happened there?
You know, the big deal here is a question of preserving the evidence, and that's what we're seeing in the courts. What we've seen is a court put a restraining order in place to say, look, ICE, you have to preserve the evidence. Do not do anything with it because this will probably go on. So that's one of the major things that we're seeing today. Of course, in the case of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, there are a lot of things that have to be preserved. And because ICE is separate from the police officers that work in the state of Minnesota, there's this real separation of who can do what for whom. So now the courts are jumping in and saying, look, we know that you, ICE, are not working with the police in Minnesota. However, the evidence that has been presented so far, you can't throw it away. You can't destroy it. You can't come to a final decision as to what happened. Everyone has seen those recordings, Brittany. There are a lot of questions. So on one hand, the courts are saying, preserve this evidence. A restraining order has been put in place. And we will hear more in terms of what will happen, because certainly the government, the Department of Justice is saying we don't need these temporary restraining orders. The other issue that is coming before the courts and that the courts have made a decision on is what are all of these ICE patrol agents doing in Minnesota in the first place? This is a lawsuit that was filed by Keith Ellison, and he's saying, look, why were you even here? There are thousands of you here compared to other jurisdictions where there have been ICE agents in smaller, in bigger areas where you've had fewer ICE agents. Are you here to punish us? So the judge in that case said, look, we want you to answer that. Government, answer. Why are you here? Give us your justification. So they are actually supposed to answer very soon, actually today, to determine whether or not, well, you know, these are the reasons why we're here. Now, certainly Keith Ellison and the state of Minnesota is saying that we think that you are punishing us because we are a sanctuary city. We think you are punishing us because now we've heard from Attorney General Bondi saying, listen, if you want all this stuff in Minnesota to go away, you can do a couple of things for us. You can release your welfare list. You can release your private voting list. You can do these things and we'll make all of this go away. So it's like they are holding hostage this situation in Minnesota. Now there's new things on the table. And I think, Brittany, what we're going to see is so many more new things and demands on both sides. It's just very difficult to determine where we will end up.
Well, we will have to watch that case and see what happens next. Let's take it down to Georgia and the Gullah Geechee community. What's happening there? They're fighting back.
Yeah, you know, they're fighting back. They fought back. This isn't 100% win. It's interesting because I went to Sapelo Island last year and took a look at the Geechee. It was really wonderful. The Gullah culture, and to see the place where the descendants of slaves from hundreds of years ago still live. There are about 50 people who live in this community on a full-time basis. Of course, there are other people who come in and out of the community, and that's what this case is all about. This has to do with protecting and preserving land and culture. What's going on is that there are ordinances in place in the Sapelo Island saying that you cannot build a house that's over 1,400 feet. Well, the island is beautiful. I mean, it really is. I don't know if you've ever been down there, but
No.
There are people who want to come in, of course, and build larger vacation homes that are 3,000 square feet. So these outsiders have been coming in and saying, I need a place to vacation with my family. This 1,400 square feet limitation that you have, it won't do. So they fought in order to get an ordinance in place to build bigger homes. Well, the community said no. They fought, first of all, to even be able to have a referendum, because the powers that be in Sapelo said, you know what, and in Georgia said that this isn't even allowed to be on a referendum. So they first fought to get it on a referendum. Then the vote just recently came in within the past few days. And the people who came out and voted said, no, we do not want these homes to be built bigger than 1,400 square feet. Why? You've got tax issues that come along with that. You've got people who come in and change the land, change the culture, change everything about what's going on and what has been preserved over hundreds of years. So this was really a win for them. There are some questions that still arise, Brittany, in and around the zoning ordinances and, kind of what was old and what is now new. There's still a little combativeness, but one thing is for sure, that down there, those homes, they will not be built larger than 1,400 square feet. It also is a matter of gentrification. We know that's happening across the country. And if they had lost this vote, they literally have been inviting gentrification to come in and take place.
And tell us, what note should other neighbors take from this community in Georgia?
I think the note is this, that they are a prideful community, that even though they are small in numbers, they are big in heart, big in their power, and big in kind of hitting the ground running and galvanizing people to come out. Because there were about 20% of the voting base did come out to the special election, which is a very big deal. Small in numbers, but big in their power. And they were relentless. They got help. They got attorneys that were able to help them from different parts of the country in order to make this happen. They fought along the way, too. One of the things that came up was that during this process, when there was the opportunity for the community to be heard, they were told that they couldn't record it. They were told that, the meetings would happen at a certain time, which were outside of the times where lots of people could come. They fought all of that. The message is they might be a small number, but they sure are mighty powerful and force not to be messed with.
Well, we see them. We surely do.
Okay.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about social media. It seems like TikTok has agreed to settle a social media suit involving addiction.
Yeah, this is such an interesting thing. I don't know how much you scroll, but I have found myself online, and I teach students and they tell me that they spend 8 hours online and they spend eight hours, on their phones. And I have found myself on there for some very long times too. So this actually is a product liability question. The people that have been sued, TikTok, Snap, Meta, and YouTube. Now, TikTok and Snap, they actually settled this case with a person by the name of KGM, all right? A young woman who's 20 years old. We don't know her name for obvious purposes. But that being said, she sued all four of these entities. And what she said was, there's really a product liability case. There's a product issue with your product, in that it was a reckless process in the way that you came together to put your product, knowing that the algorithms, that the automatic push feeds would cause her to have an addiction and essentially feel bad about herself, how she looked, have suicide ideations, feel bad about her body dysmorphia, in effect causing mental illness. So she and her mother sued all four of these entities saying that this is your fault. And as it turns out, they were going to go to court just this week. Now, two of them settled, as you said. Snap settled, as well as TikTok settled. Undisclosed settlement. I'm sure that it was not small, because Brittany, one thing people should understand about settlements is that settlements make both sides happy. So I'm sure that both sides walked away with a very decent number for their pockets. But at the end of the day, you have the other two. You have Meta and you have YouTube. Those cases are going to continue. And in fact, they are in the middle of jury selection as we speak. So we are not going to see this case disappear, but we are going to hear more from their, thousands of other cases that are just like this one. This is just the first one that is actually getting attention. I also want to add, Brittany, that we're not just talking about people who are plaintiffs. We're talking about school boards that are plaintiffs, because these school boards are saying that now we're dealing with so many mental health issues because of your Snap, your algorithm, your automatic feeds, and they are now plaintiffs in this case. So there's a lot more to be seen. And I'm sure that you can understand, right? I can imagine that, it kind of is addictive. You get on there and
it absolutely is addictive.
It is very addictive. One of the other interesting points that was brought up is that the defense in this is saying, well, how do we know it was the algorithms in and of itself? maybe it's the actual material that is making people kind of addictive. I do not think that's a very good argument. I mean, once you are on your cell phone and you look at one feed and you start liking, a little mother with her little babies or talking babies, that is what you're seeing.
It messes the algorithm all the way up, huh?
All the way up, right? The algorithm is, I mean, there's a tyranny in the algorithm for real. So we will see more of these cases. This is the first of hundreds and hundreds to come.
Well, you will certainly have to keep us updated on the breakdown, Candace. I have one more case for you to break down for us, if you don't mind. It's about a nurse practitioner in Texas accused of mailing abortion pills.
Yeah, here's the takeaway from this case. 2 words: shield law. These laws have been put in place for people like this woman who was sued out of Delaware. She's a nurse practitioner. What she's been doing is she has been sending and selling abortion pills and drugs across state lines into states where abortions have been banished and are no longer legal. Well, here you have the Attorney General of Texas suing her. This is not the first person that he has sued, saying, you know what? What you're doing is illegal. You cannot send these abortion pills into our state. And because of that, we are coming after you. Now, shield laws are what have been put in place since the overturning of Roe v. Wade for people just like this woman in Delaware, just like this nurse practitioner. And what these laws say essentially is that you do not have to answer the subpoenas. You do not have to answer the lawsuits. You are shielded from any of the lawsuits that come from outside states. You are fine. In fact, Brittany, this happened before. Last year, there was a woman in New York. She didn't even show up to her case, and there was a default judgment against her. Ultimately, it was ruled that these shield laws did, in fact, protect her. And even though she was sending abortion pills across state lines into arenas where it was not allowed, she was shielded from it. So I think that that's what we're going to hear from this case. There's already a precedent case on record from this exact same attorney general, but I do not think he is going to quit. He is going to keep on going. But the shield laws have been in place for a couple of years now, and they seem to be doing their job.
Well, Candace Kelly, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us on The Breakdown. We appreciate you, and we hope that we will see you on the show again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And now we'll go to a quick break. We'll be right back on The Breakdown.
If in this country right now, you have people get up in the morning and the only thing they can think about is how many people they can hurt, and they got the power, that's the time for mourning.
For better or worse, what makes America special, it's that legal system that's supposed to protect minorities from the tyranny of the majority.
We are at a point of a moral emergency. We must raise a voice of outrage. We must raise a voice of compassion. And we must raise a voice of unity.
We are not in a crisis of party versus party. We are in a crisis of civilization, a human rights crisis, and a crisis of democracy itself. And guess what? You've been chosen to make sure that those that would destroy, those that would hate, don't have the final say, and they don't ultimately win.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Welcome back to the breakdown. Joining us now is Delano Massey of Axios. He's been digging into growing warnings from civil rights leaders about where the country is headed. His reporting looks at what they call a convergence of threats to democracy, the economy, and civil rights, and how those pressures are showing up in everyday communities, from local policy fights to debates over how Black history is taught and preserved. Delano, thank you for joining us on the breakdown.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on here.
Absolutely. So I want you to tell us a little bit more about your career and what led you up to this point to report about race and culture in America.
My career has been it's taken many different turns, Brittany. I started out as a reporter. I'm an editor. I think maybe a couple of years ago when Harris entered the campaign, I started to write again to provide a different voice at Axios, and have continued writing actually after that because I realized that it was something that was definitely necessary. So where things are now, I know that going into last year, with the changing in the administration, it was important to make sure that we're capturing what's happening in history. And there was a lot of concern before this administration had started about what the potential rollback would be and what the attack on DEI and so-called wokeism, what that was going to actually look like. And so I spent a lot of time this year just making sure that we're documenting it and we're capturing what's happening in history.
I know in one of your recent articles, the leaders warn of authoritarian threat. You talk about civil rights leaders saying that the country isn't facing a single crisis, but a convergence of legal, economic, and democratic threats.
Yeah. So the Urban League Roundtable was last week in Washington, D.C. They started it last year, shortly after they started to organize shortly after the election, and Mark Mariel basically asked a lot of different people to come to the table, different stakeholders, white, Black, Hispanic, men, women, LGBTQ plus. Like there were people who were stakeholders that were going to be affected by some of the policies that were going to change. That conversation last year involved about 18 organizations. Last week, 31 people were there from different vantage points. And I think it was probably more of a call to action to figure out what to do in this moment because of these threats, unemployment being one of the ways that that the changes in policy have greatly affected Black people, but especially Black women. We talk a lot about the 300,000 Black women, but we know that that number is probably much, much higher than that, potentially double, if not higher than that. So I think there's a lot of concern about, the erasure of history. And just last week, we saw them removing some of the placards that mentioned slavery just outside the National Park Museum in Philadelphia. So there's been a lot of concern about, the whitewashing of our history.
You know that many of the most significant responses are actually happening at the state and local level.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it. What usually happens is there's a decision that is made in the federal government, and then it is rolled out, and other states end up like implementing it. In this particular case, like with Philadelphia, that order is because of the Park Service, and much like the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., where there were conversations about going through the history to make sure that it isn't showing a negative portrayal of history, that it is actually celebrating America. And as we enter the 250th anniversary or the celebration of this country's birth, one of the things that I think that a lot of historians, and especially people who have been trying to fight to preserve this history, is they're very much concerned about that continued erasure of our history.
Let's go into that a little bit more about the erasure of Black history and progress. You highlighted changes to historic data, research funding, even public recognition.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, if we looked at the money, it's about $3.4 billion in the grants, and a lot of that went to HBCUs. Different databases that have been eliminated, especially as it pertains to Black health, sickle cell, and the infant mortality. So we don't have information that we could actually go to now. Like if you don't have some of these databases, it's very hard to actually take corrective measures. And so what you're referencing is the Blackout Report, which was an attempt by Onyx Impact to try to quantify all of the things that happened over the past year. That there were 591 book bans, and different authors, but most of them were people who were writing about the Black story, Toni Morrison. And so I think that, collectively, I was just talking to a source yesterday about the Department of Education and not being able to tell how many Black students there are or how many Hispanic students there are. Like, this is important data because it can show you where the disparities are. But if you don't actually have any data to show, how many students you have or what their situation is, then it's very difficult for anybody to come up with some policies that are going to be beneficial or helpful to try to close some of the gaps that we know that exist in this country.
I could keep talking to you about so many of the reports that you've done, but I want to take you back to something that you reported on last year. I see that polling shows that nearly 2/3 of Americans believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. But you also found that many Americans actually fear a civil conflict.
Yeah, I think a lot of the concern that people have is just the divide. What was very clear, and depending on, I guess, how you look at it, or whether you believe that there is a divide or it's just a disconnection, a lot of that reporting is about people's belief in not feeling safe in this country, where there were hate crimes that had increased. We've seen more political attacks. What it does show us is that people they're in a different place than they were maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but especially if we looked at the last 5 years from what we would call the 2020, the unrest that existed then, right? The social unrest and what we would call a reckoning. But the recoil and what has happened and how the pendulum has actually shifted back the other way. I think that there are a lot of concerns about the ICE raids and whether it's Minneapolis or Chicago. Like, we have seen this country change, and people are very alarmed, and they're not feeling as safe as they used to.
Well, Delano, we appreciate your reporting and all that you're doing to bring this information to us, especially here on The Breakdown. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Anytime.
Well, after the break, did you miss Roland Martin Unfiltered last night? No worries. We'll break it down after the break here on the Black Star Network.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Violent white supremacy is, quote, the most persistent and lethal threat in the homeland.
The greatest terrorist threat to the homeland is the homegrown violence stream, including hate crime committed on behalf of some kind of white supremacist ideology.
They are coming after everything in Black America. MAGA and Donald Trump are specifically targeting Black America. They are going after the money. Attack Black Lives Matter. Attack critical race theory, attack woke, DEI. MAGA wants to defund Black America. This is a perfect example of their desire to completely degrade and de-emphasize Black people.
Hi, I'm Swing Cash, Basketball Hall of Famer, and you're watching Black Star Network.
Well, in case you missed Roland Martin Unfiltered last night, Roland highlighted the genius way that Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Cortez addressed the big pharmaceutical companies' drug price tactics.
I just love really smart folk who know how to, as the late Joe Madison would say, You got to put it where the goats can get it. One of those folks is Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So in a recent health subcommittee, this hearing took place, the hearing subcommittee on energy and commerce, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez really just laid out in front of these insurance executives where she just tore apart the CEO of CVS, how she just broke David Joyner down when it came to their captive strategy of steering patients within their system, their ecosystem, where they control everything. This was brilliant questioning. Watch.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and apologies if we have to move quickly here due to the time. Thank you to all of our witnesses for coming here today. Mr. Joyner, you are the CEO of CVS Health, correct?
Correct.
And I actually don't know how many Americans know this, but CVS Health owns Aetna, the health insurance company, correct?
Correct.
And CVS, which owns Aetna, also owns Oak Street Health Medical Clinics, correct?
Yes, it does.
And in addition to that, they own, of course, CVS Pharmacies, and CVS Health also owns CVS Caremark, the pharmacy benefit manager, which helps negotiate some of these rebates and prescription prices, correct?
That's correct.
And CVS Caremark processes nearly 30% of all prescriptions in a given year. And so, in other words, CVS Caremark helps determine the prices that patients pay for a third of all prescriptions in the U.S. In fact, I was following one of CVS's investor calls where they really laid out quite clearly what this means if you are a patient. This is what's known as a captive strategy. And CVS, in the investor call, used the example themselves of a patient known as Kate. Kate has an Aetna health insurance plan right here, and which is owned by CVS Health. She then goes to a CVS pharmacy. She's connected to an Oak Street Health medical clinic. She sees a doctor at Oak Street Health who prescribes her medication. And then she goes to fill that prescription at a CVS pharmacy. So the price Kate pays for that medication is dictated by Aetna, CVS Caremark, and they also own the drug manufacturer Cordavis. Mr. Joyner, this is quite a bit of market concentration. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree that it's market concentration. I would suggest it's a model that works really well for the consumer.
Yeah, I think it works very well for CVS. I think, in fact, you all said on the call that you all call it a fully engaged member. It's great marketing there. Fully engaged member unlocks sizable value for payers and CVS Health. So the health insurance gets a cut, the pharmacy benefit manager gets a cut, the drug manufacturer gets a cut, and the patient gets screwed. I think the Federal Trade Commission has also found that healthcare conglomerates like CVS Health charge more for medications filled at their pharmacies. We're talking about 1,000% markups on medications for cancer and HIV. And, I think this is actually an interesting point of common ground that I may have with some of our Republican colleagues here in this hearing. Because whether you're a blue-blooded capitalist or a card-carrying democratic socialist, I think corporate monopolies are a problem. And this vertical integration is destroying people's ability to access care. I don't think we're seeing this across the board. And if they can self-deal, I saw something that was interesting from the opening statement of Mr. Hemsley from United Health talking about how much United spends, 85% on care, Mr. Hemsley? Approaching 90%. But the ACA forces you all to spend a decent amount of that on subsidies on care. But when you own the care, when the insurer owns the pharmacy, owns the PBM, owns the drug manufacturer, you also own the healthcare cost. You own a big chunk of the healthcare cost. And so 100 years ago, we had this type of market concentration in our banks. And we did something about it when it crashed the economy. And we passed the Glass-Steagall Act. We should be considering that in our healthcare system. And if we believe in competition, I think we should put our votes and our legislation in alignment with that and consider breaking up this industry in order to allow the competition that prevents this kind of vertical integration and abuse of power. And with that, I yield back.
I remember being in Brussels and they were shaking.
Woo! That's how you light that ass up. And that's how you break this stuff down. Cody, a lot of people, it amazes me when I see these people, they go, oh, these, I see these hearings and these things serve no purpose. Well, the reality is when you're in the minority, listen, the hearings are there for you to actually question folks, to shine a light on what's going on. And I've covered, I mean, we've covered a lot of these different hearings, and it's stuff that needs to come out. Well, you can't, if you say, well, how are we going to get it out? Where else are you going to do it? I mean, everything is not going to be done with news coverage. So these hearings serve an important purpose to be able to question and challenge corporate leaders and political leaders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And there's no secret that insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, they're all finding ways to monopolize the healthcare industry. And CVS obviously seems to be no different. But I want to remind people that just last year, a few months ago, several drug companies made deals with the Trump administration to lower prices. And this month, in the month of January, when prices usually jump up, several of those companies increased their prices anyway, despite the deal that they made with the Trump administration. So one, that really shouldn't be a surprise, but it's time for Congress to enact against these corporations. There are monopoly laws in place, but there have been regulations that have put in place to weaken those laws. And we also know that some of our federal government officials, their campaigns have been funded by some of these corporations. And so I like to think that I'm well read and I know some of the things that are going on. And my question sometimes when I see some of these things that are happening that are not fair to the American people, such as capitalist greed or corporation greed that we know that has skyrocketed over the last few years, especially since the 2020 pandemic, what can be done at this point? And maybe Roland, you can answer that question for me, because I'm just like, we have these public hearings, like you mentioned. What's next? How are these people going to be held accountable so that they're not essentially scamming the American people?
Well, to your particular point, this was an NPR story right here from a couple of weeks ago, and this drug price research firm called 46 Brooklyn reported that drug companies, including the 16 that made deals, raised the prices of 872 brand name drugs in the first 2 weeks of 2026. Listen, the only way this thing happens is through politics. A lot of people, this is where, Terry Ann, we're always on this show trying to explain to people, you have to connect the dots. Well, I cannot stand, and I'm really trying not to curse. So, I've been doing well. I'm trying not to cuss. But it drives me up the damn wall when people go, oh, man, politics has no impact on my life. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It has an impact on your life. The reality is whoever sits in the White House, also Congress, can have an impact on drug prices.
Right.
The problem that we have is, and this is just a reality, you've got more Democrats than Republicans who want to do something about pharmaceutical prices, but you also got some Democrats who are bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. Lobbying is fierce, and that's what you have going on. But people have to recognize Congress, federal level, state houses, politicians have a role to play on drug prices, on all sorts of things. This is why we can't sit elections out, not one.
Well, we have so much more coming up for you on the breakdown, so stay with us here on the Black Star Network.
If in this country right now, you have people get up in the morning and the only thing they can think about is how many people they can hurt, and they got the power, that's the time for mourning.
For better or worse, what makes America special, it's that legal system that's supposed to protect minorities from the tyranny of the majority.
We are at a point of a moral emergency. We must raise a voice of outrage. We must raise a voice of compassion. And we must raise a voice of unity.
We are not in a crisis of party versus party. We are in a crisis of civilization, a human rights crisis, and a crisis of democracy itself. And guess what? You've been chosen to make sure that those that would destroy, those that would hate, don't have the final say, and they don't ultimately win.
I'm Risa Colbert, and you're watching the Black Star Network.
Well, on the Noble Spotlight, we're highlighting change makers who are reshaping how we see our communities and our history. Joining us today is Samson Livingston, the founder of Through Two Eyes and creator of the Walk and Talk Tours. Through storytelling and place-based history, Samson is helping people connect more deeply to the neighborhoods that they live in and the stories that often go undertold. Samson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I know it's like the premiere week of the breakdown with Brittany Noble, so I feel so honored to be a part of the opening week festivities.
Thank you. Yes, we had to speak with you because you are doing great work in the community, Indianapolis, and really, I know you're growing. So tell us a little bit more about the Walk and Talk Tours and how you even got started doing this.
Yeah, when the pandemic was going on and we had all of the Black Lives Matter protests, and rightfully so, the unrest, I wanted to do something to kind of bring attention to that, but also talk about how we got to this point in time. So when I was 25 years old, I did my first walking history tour in Indianapolis. I've always loved history. It was just amazing to see how much Indianapolis connected with the history that I was sharing. You know, I had thought that like maybe people would be apprehensive or push back, but like these are facts that I'm sharing. And I want to just echo some of Delano's points, who was speaking earlier, that a lot of this history is being erased and it's intentionally hidden from you. And a lot of times people are actually excited to learn something that has been hidden from them, that tells them about themselves, but also tells them about the city in which they live. And so it's been an amazing thing, and I love doing it.
Tell us about where some of your tours are located and what kind of things that you teach people about when they're on your Walk and Talk tours.
Yeah, so in Indianapolis, we have a beautiful Black history. And a lot of that is around Indiana Avenue. Okay, and Indiana Avenue was the epicenter of Black history and culture and creativity here in our city. And it was all over the place. But I have this mural that I had an artist come paint in my house. So this is not an AI backdrop. This is real. This is real art on here. That's Walker Theater in Indianapolis, named after the world famous entrepreneur, Madam C.J. Walker. And she set up here and really built her business. And all around there, all around that area, before she got there, after she left, was this thriving Black community. And so that's my favorite area to talk about. But we truly talk about Indiana history. We're just going to make sure we don't leave out the Black people that had a lot of contributions to it.
Tell us about the people that go along the walk and talks with you. Like, is this life-changing to them? You know, does it change the way that they see their own neighborhoods and understand our history?
Absolutely. It's very eye-opening for people. And sometimes I'm just filling in gaps. Also, sometimes people are telling me things that they've learned. You know, we take church groups, we take field trips, we take all types of corporate outings and things like that. And so one thing that's cool that I think about when it comes to the kids, I love working with kids, is that when I grew up in Indianapolis, I didn't know about this tour guide that loved history and was passionate about showcasing the stories of Black people and just all other Hoosiers. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know what that would look like, but I would have loved it as a kid. And now there's kids in Indianapolis that grow up knowing that I exist, and they can go take that into whatever aspect of their life that they want to, but they know I'm here, I'm passionate, and I care. I think it's important to show not only kids, but adults too. Like, if you really care about something, it just seeps into you. So often people ask me, how do you know all this stuff? How do you remember all this stuff? Because I care, and I think that's important.
You're not just on Indiana Avenue. You are all over. Tell us about some of the big events that you've been able to partner up with and how you've been able to bring history to that.
Yeah, well, Indianapolis is a world-class city, and we showcase the top-notch events in the world. And so whether we're hosting the NBA All-Star Game, we're hosting the U.S. Olympic swim trials, even we're hosting the Final Four coming up in a few months, we're going to do some tours that are themed around that. I've gone down to Evansville in the southwest part of our state and shared some history. I'm going to go down to French Lick next week. Actually, I'll be in French Lick talking about beautiful Black history and what you may consider rural Indiana. Because we've really been everywhere. So New York City was a great place. I did tours just connecting Indiana Avenue to Harlem. And Madam C.J. Walker was out there, and Babyface performed at the Apollo and the Jackson 5. And so I love making connections. And like in my head, Indianapolis and Black Indianapolis in particular is the center of the universe, and everything is connected to it. And so without everything that I do, whether it's talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, or talking about Harlem, or talking about where the Super Bowl is going to be played, I'm going to find a way to bring some Black people from Indianapolis into that story.
Tell us, Samson, why is it just so important for people to know and understand their history?
I think it's so inspiring, no matter where you are, what you look like, understanding your history is the most important thing that you can do, while also having the utmost respect for every culture's history, every city's history. Everybody's history is worthy of respect and acknowledgement, And the part of history that gets overlooked the most, to me, is that era between slavery and civil rights. They don't want to really tell you what happens in between there. But the resiliency that is showed by Black people, by white people, our Asian community, all during that time with the internment camps, and even with workers' rights, all the stuff that they don't want to talk about, like the unions and all these things that made us who we are. I think it's important to know and understand, because a lot of this history, as it always does, is repeating itself. And the more that you know about what happened during some of these, after the word I'm trying to use is like tumultuous times, I guess. If you know what happened before, you can kind of see what they're trying to do and understand how to combat that.
That's good, Samson. How can we connect with you online, and tell us what's next for you?
I really don't know. I want to maybe get up to Chicago a lot more. That's close, but I love Indiana with my whole heart. I really respect, before I plug myself, I really respect, Roland Martin and his commitment to using his voice and making sure that we are well aware of what's going on. Roland Martin's a voice I've listened to for a long time. My father, Dion Livingston, is tapped into Black media and has been his whole life. And so for me, that's really important. But I'd love for people to follow me at Walk and Talk Indy on Instagram, on TikTok. We're constantly sharing things that aren't just pertaining to Indiana, but pertaining to the whole world that we live in. And I think Indiana's a big part of that. But Walk and Talk Indy, Instagram, TikTok, Walk and Talk Indy, spell it out. Walk and Talk Indy, Walk and Talk Indy.
Samson Livingston, thank you for telling us more about Walk and Talk Indy and for all that you are doing in the community. We appreciate you.
On all your success, Brittany. You look fantastic.
Thank you, Samson.
Right.
All right, we have much more coming up after the break. Stay with us. You are watching The Breakdown.
If in this country right now, you have people get up in the morning and the only thing they can think about is how many people they can hurt, and they got the power, that's the time for mourning.
For better or worse, what makes America special, it's that legal system that's supposed to protect minorities from the tyranny of the majority.
We are at a point of a moral emergency. We must raise a voice of outrage. We must raise a voice of compassion. And we must raise a voice of unity.
We are not in a crisis of party versus party. We are in a crisis of civilization, a human rights crisis, and a crisis of democracy itself. And guess what? You've been chosen to make sure that those that would destroy, those that would hate, don't have the final say, and they don't ultimately win.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
For the culture today, we're talking food, family, and the stories passed down through the kitchen. Made with Love is more than a cookbook. It's a celebration of heritage, connection, and the joy of gathering around food. Joining us today is Couture Janine Antogeorgi, the author of Made with Love, to share the heart behind the recipes and the memories that inspired them. Couture, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we're excited to have you. Just tell us a little bit more about your background and your family.
Well, I am born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I went to the Alcorn State University where I graduated.
Go Braves.
Became a second lieutenant in the Army. Did 12 years in the military. And now I am pursuing my master's degree right now for interior design. I have 4 children, married for 10 years. So.
A beautiful family indeed you have. Tell us a little bit more about how you're bringing everyone into the kitchen.
Well, I have a love for cooking. It's always been a passion of mine. My family is deeply rooted in Mississippi, Alabama, and my mother is also a vegan. So you mix those, country roots with a little bit of healthy eating, and that's kind of where I come into play. And just being in the kitchen brings me so much joy. With having children, a lot of times they want to help out, right? And so they're like, can I help with this or can I help with that? What can I do, right? And so I wanted to make this book to kind of shed light on how we can integrate our children into the kitchen, how we can show them now what it is that they can do. So that way, when they get older, they know the things that they can do in the kitchen and cook and learn and have a great time with us.
Couture, that is good. Tell us about some of the food that brings you guys together. What's some of the dishes that you guys love to cook together?
Oh my goodness. We have breakfast. The kids love buttermilk pancakes, French toast. One of their favorites right now is a Dutch baby. It can be made in a cast iron skillet. You pop it in the oven and it's ready in less than 20 minutes. In this book in particular, I have lunch, snacks, desserts, soups, even drinks and beverages. So it's really exciting.
Okay. Was there a moment when you realized that I've got to write this book? I got to get this on paper?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that I was sharing on social media, and I think it was a lot of people asking, one, for recipes, but then when they saw the kids in the kitchen, they wanted to know, how is it that you have the patience to have them with you? And so I wanted to write this book to really cultivate family time, to really show how at first it may be a strong learning curve to bring them in, but what you will really find is how to integrate them safely into the kitchen, around the sharp knives, around the hot stove, but then also to create those memories with them. And as they get older, they learn these things, right? And so they're able to do a lot of things on their own. And so you're teaching them now while they're young, and it'll pay off in the end.
Well, I see you in the kitchen right now. What's on your heart today? What are you guys going to make for dinner?
Well, right now we have this cold front coming. So I am going to probably cook up some beef stew tonight. We just finished our chicken noodle soup, and I know it's cold all across the country right now. So within this book, again, I have something called Broth of Life. That's a chapter where you can find all kind of great and delicious soups and stews to warm your stomachs.
Ooh, that sounds fantastic, Katura. Well done. Tell us a little bit more about where we can find your book and how we can support you.
Well, you can follow me on Instagram at Katura_Janine. And if you go on Amazon right now, you can type in Made with Love Cookbook Katura, and it'll pop up right there. So it'll just be exciting just to be able to have this book into your home and just invite us in. To be able to bring your family along. And even if you don't have children, if you know someone who has children, this would be a great book to learn how to bring the family together at dinner time.
Oh, that is great. Katura, Made with Love, thank you so much for joining us and telling us more about your cookbook.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, folks, be sure to join us here on the Black Star Network tonight for Roland Martin Unfiltered. That show is at 6 p.m. Eastern, and you can catch up on everything that is going on. I want to thank you for just staying with us for the breakdown today at noon. I'm your host, Brittany Noble. We'll be back again tomorrow. Please find me on social media at The Noble Journalist. Have a great day.